We are here in New York City and we are filming for our Jazz Archive at Hamilton College. We have with us today one of the most renowned bass players, studio musicians, and overall musicians in the United States, Bob Cranshaw.
Thank you. Pleasure to meet you and pleasure to be here.
Yeah. You're an outstanding bass player, and you've been on just a scad of recordings. But how did you get started? First of all, what attracted you to the bass as to other instruments?
I'm really a percussionist. I started out wanting to be a concert percussionist. I was not really interested in jazz at all, but I wanted to be a classical percussionist. But my father was a drummer who grew up with Count Basie. He grew up in Kansas City, and so he goes back to the Count Basie early days. And I have a brother who is a pianist who was also in New York and worked briefly with Miles years ago. And I have a brother who is a vibist. So since my father was also a drummer, I figured that there was no reason for me to buck. I just wanted to play anything. I wanted to play with the family. And since he was a drummer, I wasn't going to move him over. He was there first. So I decided to play bass. And I like choral music a lot. In school, in high school, and in college. I was always involved in choirs, and I wanted to kind of be a choir director. And my father was a choir director for the church, so I got a chance. I was always around music, and I just decided to play bass. So my brother would sit down at the piano, and I guess it's in say maybe early, say 49 or 50. I started to study the bass, and I really had a hard time trying to learn the instrument. I mean, it wasn't really easy, but I wanted to play football. I was also a football player, and I was more interested. You know, I wasn't sure whether I liked bass or what was happening, but I started to think about what would happen to my hands. First, that was one of the major things. The orchestra director would say, well, you're playing football, but what about your hands? What if something happens to your hands? And eventually he went out. I finally really got serious about the string bass, and I studied with a teacher at Northwestern University. I'm from Evanston, Illinois, so I spent a lot of time at Northwestern. And I graduated from Roosevelt University in Chicago in musical therapy. But I've been working as a working musician for years and never really gotten into the musical therapy, but that's kind of how I got around to the string bass. And once I got into it, I had such a rough time, I just decided to stay with it. I never tried to play drums again, and it's been years of all bass.
Let me ask you, you said that your orchestral director was talking about your hands. So did you study classically? You study with the bow?
Yeah, I studied classically.
You know, this is just my observation. I find people that have studied with the bow have incredibly solid intonation.
Yeah, I mean, I never thought about really wanting to be, as far as a bass player, I wanted to get involved in the symphony with the bass. I guess the teacher that I studied with in Chicago, his prize student was Richard Davis. And at that time, Richard and I were around the same age, and Richard was they were already priming him for the Chicago Symphony at that point, you know, but he passed it up, but he was really an excellent player. I didn't get into it that deep, you know. I wish I had, but coming from a musical family and being around music, I started out playing piano when I was about 4, and I played piano by ear. So I think I studied maybe a year or 2 with a teacher, and after 2 years I found out I was playing everything by ear. The teacher would play my lesson for the next week, so once I heard it, I had no problems. I'd go out and play baseball. And my brother would practice the piano, and I would be outside playing baseball and go right back to my lesson and play exactly what she played. So it kind of gave me an in when I started to play the bass, my brother would play a chord, and I would find the note to fit the chord. And because I had an ear, it was easier for me to play. So I learned to read, but I kind of used both situations. Since God gave me the ear, I didn't throw it away. I just also used my ear, and I think it kind of hurt in the way that I didn't follow through probably with the studies, because I already heard, you know, when if I heard a piece, that was all I needed. I could play it. Once I heard it, it was over.
Well, I want to ask you something about that, and give me your feedback on this, because to me, jazz is a music that the best jazz to me still emanates from oral culture.
Yes.
And that means you got to have an ear.
Yeah.
And yet it's so sophisticated now, you got to have some training too.
Yeah. But for me, I think it enabled me to be able to do a lot of things, you know, because I can go on a job, and whether I've heard the music or whatever, I'm never frightened as to what, you know, music in front of you, then that's another story, because it's there, so you don't have a chance to do, you know, those things. And it took me a long time to really learn to read, because I had depended upon my ear for so many years that it took, again, a lot of practice to learn to read. But I was determined that I was going to win that battle also, and I did. But the ear part has just helped me, especially with the jazz things. I just, you know, I play what I hear. I know the chords and things to the tunes, but I can follow. You can go where you want to go. You can change keys. You can do whatever you like to do. I would rather you not tell me, because I'm not thinking about it. I'm only thinking about what I hear, you know. So working with a lot of piano players like Monty Alexander, and working with Earl Garner and people like that who play by ear. I mean, Monty and I, we would play and start a tune in one key, and we could end up in another key, and not really, we didn't think about it. It was nothing that we thought we were in another key. It felt like, you know, the key that we were in. I mean, we would just go off on tangents with just playing, and it was wonderful for me, because it gave me a chance to use God. I feel gave me the talent and the ear to be able to hear, so I didn't see any reason why not use it. It is that I had to use it with the academics. Then I finally got into that, and I got really deep into it, so I'm thankful that I did now, you know, with the studio things and being able to do other things besides just play what I hear, or being intimidated by going someplace and they put music there, and then, oh my God, you know, I can't read it, you know.
So, in other words, you can go all three ways. You can, if they give you notes, if they give you changes, or if they just ask you to hear the forms.
Yes.
That's marvelous. And of course, we're filming this at our college, and I'm glad that students are hearing this, that it takes a combination of those skills. Tell us when you first started working with Sonny Rollins.
I worked with Sonny, started in, I think, 1959 or 60. Sonny, I played the first Playboy Jazz Festival, and I met Sonny before around Chicago, but I never worked with Sonny. Usually Victor Sprouls or different bass players who were a little older usually work with Sonny, and who were more established. And one day Sonny heard Walter Perkins, a drummer, and I, who we were like, we came as a package. You know, we worked a lot of jobs at the London House and different places on the off nights for Oscar Peterson, people like that. We would work opposite them one night and spell another band that was there on Mondays and Tuesdays. So I got a chance to meet a lot of the name people and play opposite them. But it you know, it gave me a chance to meet a lot of people, and through this, one day Sonny was doing the Playboy Festival, and he asked Walter Perkins to do it, and he said, Walter, get the bass player who you would like. So I was hired. We played the festival. It was really a very funny situation, because it was in the afternoon, on a Sunday afternoon. Sonny Rollins told us to be there. I think the concert maybe started at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. I think about 2. Sonny said, look, be there ready to play at 1. I get there, we don't see no Sonny. I haven't seen him. 2 o'clock comes, the concert starts. The first group plays 15, 20 minutes. The second group, 15 or 20 minutes. The third group was a Dixieland band, and we were the fourth group to go on. The Dixieland band played 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, a half an hour. They're waiting now for Sonny to come in. The Dixieland band played, I think, for at least 40 minutes. By that time, people were wiped out with hearing the band. They were looking now, they're ready to hear Sonny. Still no Sonny. Come to find out, when the people started to really get tired, all of a sudden Sonny comes out. Sonny had probably been in the auditorium since 11 o'clock, just casing everything, but he picked his time to want to come out, and we just tore the place up, and it was just trio, just bass, drums, and saxophone. No rehearsal, we just played, and it was a wonderful experience. Now, Sonny hadn't really come out at that time. He was still in retirement, but that was the only thing that he had worked, and he asked me at that time would I like to be a part of his group. So I said, sure, you know. But I never thought that, you know, Sonny Rollins, come on. It's like a joke, but I'll go along with it. It's okay, you know. I appreciate you asking. About a year and a half later, he wrote me letters. We didn't start right away. About a year later, he finally said, I'm ready to put this group together, and with Walter Perkins, Jim Hall, and myself. And that's how, and that goes back to, I guess, 1960 or 61. I've been with Sonny over 35 years. I'm still on and off. I would leave. I left in Sonny and went with Joe Williams. The segue, because Sonny, the group was, Sonny's group, we at this time we were playing, I guess it was Don Cherry and Billy Higgins, and it was more free form. And although I enjoyed, I got a lot out of it, I didn't feel that I was really adequate for the role. I like to play changes. I'm not a free form, you know. I need guidelines, restrictions, or whatever. I needed a more structured situation. So I stayed with Sonny and for a while, and it got kind of loose to me, and I didn't want to put the music down that we were doing. It just was not exciting to me, but I knew Sonny, being the genius that he is, he was ready for that step. I wasn't ready for it. Emotionally, musically, I could have probably accepted, but emotionally, I didn't really feel good, and I didn't want players to feel like I was putting them on by just playing. I mean, you know, just anything. I just didn't feel right about it. So I left and went with Joe Williams to play the blues. I needed to come back to what I was familiar with.
Okay, now I got to ask you something. Tell us, is blues, why you say you had to play the blues?
Yeah.
Tell us how and why, or in your own words, how blues is an anchor. Why does it seem like so much music comes back to that? Even when a guy's taking a solo and he's out there and he's saying something abstract and he wants to come back down home, he'll play that blues scale.
Because there's so much, not only is there the changes just right, but the feeling of the music, you know. I mean, Joe, I grew up on Joe Williams. I mean, I can say as a young guy, I was young at that time, and it was just right for me, because Joe's stuff was very structured, but he was such a professional. We would get on the stage and we would be swinging. I mean, the music felt so good every night. It was just very consistent, and the trio was Junior Mance and Mickey Roker, and we had a good time with each other, but it was a thrill to play with Joe Williams, because I just grew up. I mean, I became a man with Joe Williams. He gave me that foundation, you know, and how to greet people, how to be, and not only that, he introduced me to some of the most influential people in my life. One was Milt Hinton. Joe Williams did a lot of recordings with Milt Hinton and Jimmy Jones or Hank Jones and Ozzie Johnson. And I got a chance to sit and just watch these people. Any record date he had, I was there. But anytime Milt Hinton would record, I would follow him around like a puppy. You know, if Milt Hinton had a date, I just wanted to see how Milt Hinton and George Duvivier, how they approach music. And I would ask questions with Joe if they played something. I knew that after they finished recording it, I was going to have to play it, because this is what we would do in our performances. So it was like catching firsthand the master play it, and then I could branch off of what they were playing, because they might have used a larger group, maybe with horns, where when we got ready to play it, we had to do it with trio. But I was there. I wanted to understand everything about that tune and what I could do. And I would ask Milt Hinton, you know, well, why did you play this there? Well, why did you play this F here as opposed to playing it there? What did you hear here? So I wanted to know everything that Milt Hinton was doing it. And I feel like I'm a Milt Hinton clone in a way, because I enjoyed watching Milt, how he carried himself and what a gentleman he is, and how great. I used to walk in and I'd be sitting at a record date and I'd be like kind of hiding. I just didn't want to, you know, bug him. And I would wait until he came in, and it could be a record date with 50 musicians. When Milt Hinton walked in the door, he felt an energy. You know, it was something like a storm just hit the place. I mean, it was so great, and I enjoyed that feeling. So I said, this is what I would like to be. This is the way I would like to carry myself. This is what I would like to become, you know, and it maybe kept me from doing some of the things, because during that period, a lot of the musicians were into a lot of drugs, you know.
Okay, I have to say something. I'm going to come back to that, because you're saying something that's really precious. Now, I want to come in right here and finish up on something on Joe Williams.
Okay.
And then we're going to come back to that.
Okay.
That's terribly important. But tell us about Joe Williams as a vocalist. What could singers today learn from Joe?
Joe could do everything. He could sing a ballad, any tune. He's one of the few people, he could, anything that he wanted to sing, he could sing. He had the voice, he had the range, he had the presence to really carry it off, you know. And I just remember some of the places we used to go to. Toronto, we worked there a lot, and in the audience would be Oscar Peterson and his trio, and they enjoyed. I mean, we would be cooking, you know. It was just an honor. I never felt that our performance was not worthy of whatever, because it was so consistent. It was just great every night. I couldn't wait for Joe to hit the stand, because some of the tunes were just gorgeous. And I mean, I go back, I talked to Ray Brown's wife, and she remembers the times that they used to come and catch us in San Francisco, and it was just burning. I mean, it was incredible. You know, it felt so good. I wanted to scream. It was just that great. But Joe was very patient with me as a young player, and talking to me and trying to keep me from running all over the place. I was married, and to keep my family thing. I mean, he was really, he was instrumental in me becoming a man. I mean, I feel.
He's more than a musician, wasn't he?
Yeah. A wonderful person. I had a great time with, you know, with Joe Williams.
Now, I want to come back in and say, you said that there was a lot of things going on, a lot of trouble the young men could get into. But the music and the masters of the music kept you away from it. Elaborate on that.
Well, Milt Hinton was one of the masters. One of the things that was funny, when I came to New York, I had a decent bass, but I had a bass case that was so raggedy. I mean, it was in bad shape, and I used to go to clubs and so forth. So Milt looked at this bass case, and he said, "Son, you can't be going around with a case like this. you know. So he donated a. He gave me a bass bag, so because he was embarrassed, you know, I wasn't quite, but it showed me. I mean, he was just his demeanor. His at that time when I came to New York, there were a lot of jobs. There were a lot of studio things happening, and every ABC, CBS, and NBC, they all had studio orchestras. And so Clark Terry and a lot of these guys that a lot of people don't know were in these bands. But the bands didn't have TV shows to play, so they were kind of getting paid, but they were doing all kind of record dates. They would run from one studio, and it was really exciting, very exciting. I used to stand right around the corner here on 53rd and Broadway and just watch the guys run back and forth to their record dates. And you know, it was exciting. It was a very exciting time, a period, and that was in the late 50s and the 60s. It was just very exciting. You know, all of the people, but Milt Hinton and Hank Jones and the guys really were role models for the younger guys. There was a group who were already into, we were talking about the drugs. I mean, there was a separate situation happening, but the Milt Hintons and people like that were just, they were wonderful. I mean, Milt Hinton, he's just, is marvelous. He's just a marvelous person, and I wanted to be Milt Hinton. I wanted to be the next Milt Hinton was my dream. I just wanted to be like he was. And Joe and Milton, all of them were very close. So hearing their experiences, trying to relive some of the experiences that I had heard them talk about and so forth was just wonderful. And I think I caught just maybe the tail end of a period that was just incredible. And the young guys now, we don't have the same thing going. I feel kind of bad because we didn't do the same. They did this for us, and I don't think we did the same for the kids who are coming up now, which I'm trying to make up because I'm trying to work more with young people and do more with the union in different situations because I understand a lot more of what is happening and things to be able to say to a younger musician coming up now, because it's very hard. It's difficult. We have some wonderful people coming out of colleges, but I don't know where they're going. I don't know the competition, you know, whether it's classical music or whatever. This competition is fierce. It's incredible, and there's so many great players.
Has competition replaced camaraderie?
Yeah. Because they don't have a chance. We don't have enough situations that keep us together for the camaraderie. At the time when I came to New York, there were clubs all over the place. There were great musicians who were not big names, but they were great. They could play. You could walk to one corner. I mean, I didn't even want to sleep because I would go to a club and hear a group, and they sound so good. I'd go home and I'd either want to break the bass or I wanted to get started to practice. You know, it was that kind of thing going after hearing the Milt Hintons. I mean, you'd go home, you were shaking. It was so exciting. You didn't know where to start next, you know. I remember Ron Carter and I used to stand on the corner of 53rd and talk, and we called ourselves the Super Subs. I would never go into a job if Milt Hinton called for the job. He was first. He and George Duvivier. I didn't want to mess with that. I didn't even want anybody to consider me being first call. You know, I might have been fifth call, but it was okay because the people who were before me were so great. I didn't mind being fifth or sixth, so we called ourselves the Super Subs because when we went in on a job, we could really take care of business. We both knew that we were good enough to do, but I wasn't going to throw myself and say that I was greater than the people who were the number ones and number twos on the job. I didn't even think about that. If Milt Hinton got a call for a job, I was just there to hear what he was playing and to watch it go down. But I didn't want to be called. I was praying that they wouldn't call me, you know. Call them first, and if they couldn't do it, they would call me and I would go in for them. But I don't even think about calling me.
But it felt good to be a member of the club.
Yeah, it felt good that they were looking at me saying, okay, this is a great thing. We have something great coming, following us. They felt good that they were building something that they had faith in. And Ron and I were one of the two that, and Richard Davis, that they thought a lot of, and they felt good about us coming up. We were college trained. We had all of the increments of being great in whatever was happening next, so they were very open to it.
Tell us two things I want you to elaborate on a little bit. You've played on a lot of television shows. Tell us about your work on Sesame Street.
Oh, great. A great experience.
We see the shirt right here.
Yeah. But I'm 27 years with Sesame Street. It started out, I started to work, Joe Raposo was the first writer, was the musical director for the show, and I fell into the job through Chuck Israel, another bass player who was in New York, and Chuck was doing an off-Broadway show called House of Flowers. And he was leaving, going to the state of Washington to teach at a university there. So he called me and asked me if I was interested in doing this off-Broadway show for him. He was leaving, so I said, yeah, I would be glad to do it. And when I went down, they were having a lot of problems with the rhythm section. They were all arguing all the time with each other because I guess they were not getting a good feeling from the music, and the conga player didn't like the bass player and this one. So I went in and I listened to the show. I went down one evening to hear before Chuck left, and I could hear the chaos. I knew what was happening. Some of it was personalities, some of it was musicianship, but I heard it. And the next day I went in to play the show. It felt so good. We had so much fun until Joe Raposo and Joe played piano a lot different than piano players that I was accustomed to playing with, because I was playing with the Hank Jones and Jimmy Jones and all of these great people. Not that Joe was not great, it was just a different sound. He didn't comp. He played everything. He played the bass in his left hand. So I heard what was happening, and I said, okay, this is the way I've always accepted the way another person plays. So when I hear that, I try to blend what I do with what they're doing. I heard the way Joe here, the air started again. I could read the music, but I could hear what Joe was doing. And I became his left hand. So he knew that I was there regardless to what he played. I was right on top of him, and I heard it, and I didn't put him through. I didn't want him to have to change anything he was doing. I could adopt what I was doing, and what I did was to take his left hand and just make it feel good to him.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I did. I knew this I got from the Joe Williams kind of thing and the Milt Hinton. If it feels good, I like things that really feel good. I can listen to a band play out of tune, but if it feels good, if they have a certain kind of energy, I'm attracted to it. And I was attracted to the Milt Hintons and the people like that because of the energy that I heard. I love Oscar Peterson Trio. Again, I'm a big fan of Ray Brown. I'm a kind of Ray Brown clone. I like that excitement. I like that kind of energy. And I feel that's the kind of energy that I have. So I'm drawn to bass players and musicians more so who have that energy. These are the people who I enjoy working with more than others. I can work with any musician, but I have my preference as to what the feeling, because I'm kind of blues feeling when I'm playing with Sonny. My job is to set up the grooves, the pockets.
Uh-huh.
I don't have to solo. I never made myself a soloist or got into all of that. I never wanted to be a big deal. But if it felt good, I was a big deal, because I know that people come in, they understand, they hear music, but they like what they feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a feeling from Milt Hinton. Again, we go back to that situation. So this is kind of how my whole thing, how I evolved with Joe Raposo. We locked. And from that time until his death, everything that Joe Raposo, all of his ventures, whether it was a Broadway show, movies, I was always involved because he never had to worry about what he did. I never disturbed his thing. I just made his thing feel good, and I know I did. So it was an accomplishment.
You had the ability to diagnose at speed, on the spot.
Yeah, 'cause I can hear and I know that bass is important. We need bass player is very important. But I didn't want to change. He didn't play. He played the pump and he was always playing the bass note. But I didn't mind. I could hear what he was doing, and as long as I could hear it, I said, look, why disturb what he's doing? It's okay. If we play the same note, it's okay. I don't mind that. But it's going to feel good. I'm going to make the note that he plays, it's going to feel so good to him. He's going to enjoy playing it.
Uh-huh.
And so I was not only playing different music, but I was in with a different group of guys than I would ordinarily work. I would probably never have worked with a Joe Raposo or the drummer Danny Epstein. And we had a trio. We started to work, and then I got into Sesame Street. Now the three of us, with Joe Raposo playing and this guy named Danny Epstein, I had never played with a drummer who played. I mean, after playing with the Art Taylors and Philly Joe Jones and the Mickey Rokers and so forth, I started to play with this guy, Danny Epstein. And he was a Jewish guy from Forest Hills. And we would play a tune, and I'd tell him to play Forest Hills Rock. He was always asking me, well, how should I play this? So just play Forest Hills Rock. Just play what you play. But he had such a wonderful feeling we had a blend, and we enjoyed each other. We would come in and we would play and we would laugh, And I started to send other bass players when I started to work Sesame Street. After a while, I'd send in Walter Booker and a lot of other guys to also enjoy the experience that I was having working with this group of guys. I would do this during the day, and at night I was working with Billy Taylor. I was working, so I got the chance to enjoy all of it. I had my cake and I ate it too.
Oh, that's great. That's about as good as it gets for a musician. I want to ask you to elaborate on one thing here for us. I've heard you through our conversation so far, again and again, talk about the feel of music, and then you talked about having fun with the music and laughing and the grooves that you get into. Kind of give us your take on why those things are so essential to jazz. Not that orchestral music or chamber music doesn't have a given energy, but talk to us from the jazz standpoint of why those things are vital.
Well, I just think it's very important. In the classical thing, the music is based more on the conductor, if it's a conductor with the charisma, with that energy, I mean, these things in the orchestra usually come through. They have that pop. I mean, I used to go and listen to Chicago Symphony, and they would be cooking. I mean, it was all I could do to sit still, because the energy of what the orchestra was about generally was just so great. And in jazz, I just feel it's important. I think right now we're kind of getting away from some of those things because most of the players are studied players, but they're not thinking about playing time. They learn to play, but they're not thinking about whether it feels good or whatever. It's like, I'm playing. I hate to go and play for an audience and then say, well, this is what I did, like it or not. I want them to like it. I want to see that they like it.
Uh-huh.
I want to leave with that feeling that, boy, they left, they really enjoyed this, that what I went through, the experience that I went through, that we both had it together, the audience and I, we both experienced this great thing together. And this was a Joe Williams thing. I knew it was there. I didn't have to look for it. When we got through, I was so proud to come off the stage. Mm-hmm. I felt very good, and I was just a little part of whatever was happening. Joe was the bigger part, but it was just a joy. It was a pleasure to do it, and I guess I worked with Joe for 2 or 3 years. I mean, it was just an honor. So those kind of things, I'm a feeling player. But I grew up again listening to the Oscar Peterson's trio that used to cook, that I listened to daily, that I had an opportunity to play opposite for many days. And I would come off the stage. We had a trio with a guy named Eddie Higgins and Walter Perkins and I. And Eddie was going to Northwestern. We were both at Northwestern, and we would play opposite Oscar Peterson. And we had a great trio with Eddie. But of course, Oscar and Ray and Ed Thigpen wiped us out. You know, they washed us. But it was okay. I didn't mind it for a minute. You know, they stayed for a month at the London House, and for a month.
It's okay to get wiped out by people like that.
But now the next group that came in, I remember being wiped out by Oscar Peterson. The next group that came to the London House was Jonah Jones, and Jonah Jones caught it because we took out their Jonah and the group had to be playing. Whoever came in next had to really be playing. Other than that, because we were wounded. You know, we were animals and we were wounded, so we needed to come back. But it was a nice pride, and you know, we looked to get washed. You know, we knew we were like the junior Oscar Peterson, because Eddie, like Oscar, I was the Ray Brown clone, you know, and Walter was probably the only one who had his own individual thing. But Walter was such a great time player until he had such a groove. The only person that I could think that had a groove on drums like Walter Perkins was Art Blakey. You know, had such a groove. He could sit down and the stuff would just swing. As soon as he hit, it was just gone. So there are people who have that ability, and Walter Perkins was one of those people. And I stayed with Walter. We became like a duo. Anytime you saw Walter Perkins, Bob Cranshaw wasn't far behind, because we seemed to lock and have such a enjoyable time. In playing, we would go around Chicago and we would finish work with Eddie Higgins, and then we would go to another club. And soon as Walter and I walked in the door, you could hear the people start to buzz, because they knew we were going to sit in. And we would sit in and play 2 tunes and just burn. And then we would leave and go someplace else. You know, so it was a wonderful feeling, and I came up with that kind of thing. But it started also from church music. My father was a choir director, and I used to enjoy hearing the choir. First I wanted to sing, but I was too young. So I used to just sit there and hear the choir, and I'd cry. I wanted to sing bass so bad. That's another part of the bass thing. I wanted to sing bass.
So it's a voice for you. The bass is a voice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is a voice. It's a football thing. You know?
Okay.
It's the bottom. You
Okay.
know? Is the stability of whatever, you know, is the lineman, is the linebacker, is that thing that holds the glue to the whole band. So I think in wanting to sing bass, but I would listen to my father. I'd go in, I'd listen to the choir, and I would go in the basement of the church, and I would just sit downstairs and I'd listen. I could hear the music, but the rhythms of all the people in the church and the things, there would be burning. I mean, it felt so good. That was the part that was really great to me, that I liked. The feeling was just incredible.
You know, I want to say, just make an interjection here and want you to come back on that a little bit. Many of the players we've interviewed so far have said that an initial energy, a sense of spirituality, not religiously, not in a pious way, but a sense of the spiritual energy they've gleaned from church.
Yeah. There's no doubt about it. I mean, my feelings would have to come from that experience. And I would just go to different churches in Evanston, and I would go to the basement. I wouldn't go upstairs. I just wanted to hear what was the interplay between what happened with the music and what rhythms that people had on their feet and all of that. It was feel like that the roof, you know, feel like the floor was going to cave in, because it was such a great feeling, great energy. And I think as a musician, I'm more drawn to, again, a band with this kind of energies. I can like other things. I can like rock groups. I can like certain groups, but I enjoy the energy of the group. If they have that energy, that's why I'm a Steely Dan fan. They have an energy. Not only do they incorporate jazz things, but they have such an energy to the band going. I mean, it's just incredible. I couldn't stay still and listen. I mean, I love it.
I want to ask you a couple more questions here. Where is jazz going, and or where does it need to go?
It's hard to say because now we find out that jazz can make money. Before, there was money being made. We didn't realize it. We didn't get most of it. But, we wanted to play. I mean, I say now, when I go in, when I used to play in the Pit and do Broadway shows, I always wondered, I tell musicians, because I'm working a lot for the Musicians Union, not as a representative, but as a person who was plugged into the system by no fault of mine. I got plugged into the system, and now I'm getting back, I get a large pension, so that if I didn't work another day in my life, I'm really very well taken care of, my wife and I. So I'm a fortunate individual. If they would have given me the money, I'd have spent it. But because somebody else put it in. So trying to talk to the younger musicians about the system and the different things that they can get involved in, which most of them are not involved in. I mean, the younger guys coming up, there's nowhere for them to play. We could go and play at Birdland. We had all of these places to play. I was invited to play. I mean, I think back, Milt Hinton allowed me to play with Bing Crosby. Now, I was a young guy, and I walked in. Milt Hinton had more work than he could do, and at Lincoln Center, I walked in to play the bass with Bing Crosby, and Bing Crosby looked and he said, "Oh shit." I say, this guy's too young. He ain't gonna know these tunes. He didn't know I was older than he thought I was, and I knew the material. But it was just strange for him to see this young guy. But Milt had already started to build me and to give me the experiences that he thought I needed to do. The young guys now don't have an opportunity for those experiences. The record companies is a money-making situation. So if the record company takes a young guy who is promising, they start to work. I mean, it's not about the other things, and they almost make the younger musicians forget where you came from, forget all of that. This guy is an old guy, so don't, that was already done. So they're more or less trying to create. We have great guys coming out of the schools and so forth, but I think that management and the music business has taken another look at it and said, people are starting to like jazz. All of the commercials I hear, everything is jazz now, and it's a money-making situation, and most of the kids have no idea. They're not in touch with
The culture.
The Josh Redmonds and so forth. Josh never has the time to spend with some older players or to see the older players because they're already moved aside because of money or because of management. You call and you want to get a younger player on a record date, you got to go through the manager to get him, which is okay because music is music business. I mean, I also talk to kids. Music is music business, regardless to whether you're involved in classical playing or whatever. It is still a business. We just looked at it as music. I mean, we hoped that we were able to make money to feed our families from what we were doing, but it was fun. It was more fun at that time, I think. And it's hard for me, my son is a bass player, it's hard for me to relate. I tell him stories, but those stories don't hold true to the younger guys now that the guys, when I was working with Joe Williams and we were around the Basie Band, the experiences and the stories that these guys were living and talking about, I couldn't wait to experience the same things. When is my turn? right now, the younger guys don't have a chance to get into any of that. If they seem to be a little above the norm, they're taken and they're put to the side, and then they start their career. Somebody else tells you, well, this is where your career is going, this is what you do, this is what you should do. So we don't have a hands-on, and they don't have a chance to play with enough people or to work enough experiences. They come out and they're stars. The younger guys know very little tunes. They know the tunes that they write, but as far as knowing music, they don't know. You know, we came up through an era where people wrote originals, but we had so many lovely standards. I mean, there's so many great tunes out there. You know, I wish I were a writer, but I'm still trying to get to those great things that have already been written. You know, the Broadway show tunes and all of these things, the kids don't have any idea. They don't know them. And when they find them or they hear them, they're busy trying to be an individual to the tune until it takes it somewhere else. They never get the essence of what that tune is about. They just kind of hear it and then they're gone, because they're driven to have to come up with something. Don't do what he did. Don't be like him. Don't do, you know, it's this kind of thing. So they never connect in that way, which may be the fault of my era of guys, because we kind of split up. The older guys, the Milt Hintons and people, stuck together. We kind of started to get a little notoriety, and then we scattered like somebody threw a bomb in, and we all moved. We don't play together enough. You know, this guy formed this group. You never hear Sonny Rollins, Max Roach, or those group of guys really playing together anymore. They all became leaders, and they're gone, which is nice because it gives other people a chance to work off of their situations, but we don't get to hear the greatness in what they were doing. Tomorrow or Saturday is a Sonny Rollins concert, and he's using on the concert is a group of people who grew up in Harlem in a certain neighborhood. The only one, Art Taylor, died, so he would ordinarily have been the drummer, but Percy Heath, and he's using Gil Coggins, one of the piano players that worked, what do they call themselves? I forget the part of Harlem that they lived 150s up in there, but they are all neighbors. And Jackie McLean and Sonny Rollins, all of these people, as young guys, played together or experienced different things at the same time together. So they're kind of reenactment of, and Walter Bishop, and they're going to be on the show. I don't know what they're going to play. I'm not sure of what is going to happen yet. But it's a joy just to see that group together. There's some energy in the air. A lot of them haven't played or don't play a lot, but it's just nice to see it. You know, it's something about that kind of professionalism that I think that more young people should see, but we don't have a chance to see it. The older guys are already kind of moved to the side as relics. We only read about the older guys. Bob Cranshaw, I'll be 63, I'm a relic already.
Oh, don't say that now.
Well, I mean, I'm moving, you know, but I understand because of the business. So now, talking to younger players, right now I'm working with the union now to get into something else, because they're not involved in Broadway shows, because they're not involved with the symphonies and the things that are already plugged into the musicians union. I'm trying to see if I can help the union find ways to plug the jazz musicians and the rock musicians into the mainstream, so that we don't have to do benefits for a guy when he passed or these kind of things, but to be able to have the pension and welfare that I'm a part of through the Broadway shows and the TV shows without even thinking about it. I was saying, I used to go in the pit, and all the guys would be sitting, and they would be talking about the pension, and I'm trying to figure out now, why are they talking about pensions and stuff, and they're not interested in playing music? I wanted to go and burn. I was ready to cook. I mean, I was just thinking about the music. I didn't care whether there was any pension or welfare. I should have been thinking about it. But because I was not plugged in to that situation, I didn't think about it. Now I understand. So I have to make my colleagues from back there and the newer musicians aware that these things are there for them. But I'm trying to get we have the Lincoln Center Orchestra with Wynton Marsalis. We already got their group involved with the union so that they have things coming. If you're going to belong to the union should be able to do something for you. You should have something coming from it. If not, then I tell a young musician, don't join the union, because you know. But I say the same thing to the union, rather than to argue with the union or be angry at the union for what they don't do. I'm a part of the union, so I'm. When they talk about the union, they're also talking about me. I'm the part that they're talking about.
And
so,
that's good news.
Rather than to get out of it, I got into it. I said, okay, I'm not going to fight the union. I have to help the union, but I have to be a liaison between what the union would like to do and what the guys would like to do. And it's easier for me to go and talk to the jazz musicians or the rock musicians, because they know me, about a situation, and not do anything unless they want me to do it, rather than have a union representative come in and say, you know, you guys have to do that. I don't like that. You know, my back goes up if they do it to me. So I'm starting to get dialogue going we have it for the Lincoln Center. We're trying to do it for the Carnegie Hall Orchestra without disturbing what they already have going. Because we have to take into consideration that the George Weems and people are supplying so many weeks of work for these people. So it's got to be a working thing where it works for the employer and it works for the musicians. But we never had dialogue going between the two vested situations. The union was always going in and saying, well, you got to do this. And of course, when you tell somebody they got to do it, their back goes up. So you start to fight it. Let's talk and see what we have coming, how it's going to benefit the guys before we even think about doing anything. And this is what I'm about. I want to make sure that everybody is going to be covered. Other than that, don't bother me. If I don't have anything invested and you can't make my situation work for me through the union, then I shouldn't be there. I should be someplace else where they work for me, and this is what I'm about. It's a business. So,
and with that, we're going to have to kind of wrap up here, but you've told us some marvelous things. I think you've educated us. I think you've given our students and our listeners some things to hold on to. And I've appreciated talking to you, and I really like you talking about the feel in that music. Thank you.
Gotta have that.
Gotta have that.
Gotta have that groove, that pocket.
Thank you. This has been our interview with Bob Cranshaw for the Hamilton College Jazz Archive.